Welcome to the Education Innovators Podcast. I'm Eric Byron, and it is my privilege to host this show where I get to talk to folks from all over the world who are education thought leaders and innovators. We'll hear inspiring stories from educators, EdTech founders, AI experts, and others who are fearlessly innovating and delivering unique learning experiences. I'm glad you're here. Let's get started.
But the key to all of that is the teacher who is no longer in front of the classroom teaching at 30 different kids or creating lesson plans or grading papers. The teacher is really freed up to do the things that they're best at, which is to motivate the kids and to support the kids, both academically and, on a social, emotional level directly as well. So in that sense, that's where I kind of circle back to the fact that these teachers are a really rare mix of skill sets.
You know this is going to be fun. That was Jon Stewart from the Alpha School. You remember them, the school with no teachers. I did a solo episode about them, but now I've got Jon to tell us the real story. And spoiler alert, the school does have teachers. Keep listening. Welcome to the Education Innovators Podcast. I'm Eric Byron, and I am joined today with Jon Stewart. So Jon is a creative strategist and leader in education technology space, currently serving as the head of engagement at the Alpha School in Austin, Texas. In this role, he crafts compelling educational narratives that reshape how families engage with Alpha's innovative K-12 model. He leads cross-functional teams to design authentic communication touchpoints, optimize enrollment strategies, and translate complex educational concepts into emotionally resonant messages. Now, I really love that last line because this is what I'm hoping we're going to do today, Jon, right? We're going to translate complex educational concepts into emotionally resonant messages. Are you ready?
Let's do it, Eric. That sounds great.
All right, this is going to be fun. All right, and yes, for full transparency, as Jon, you and I have already talked, I did a solo episode on the Alpha School previously under the title of School with No Teachers, and we're going to dig into that. But before we get too far in on the Alpha School itself, let's get to know you a little bit better. So there's this theme that around storytelling and narratives that emerged in your extended bio, and I did Google you. So I noted that you founded a platform called narrativedrive.org, where you mentor up and coming screenwriters. And this is your background, right? You were a Hollywood screenwriter. I love Pixar movies, and you worked on some of those, including Disney's Cars 3 as a screenwriter and a list of other credits you've got there. So how does this background in screenwriting intersect with your current role as head of engagement at the Alpha School?
It's a great question, Eric. And first and foremost, thanks for having me on. I'm a big fan. I enjoyed listening to your episode too about Alpha School and a few others as well. You're doing some great work out there and translating the technical into the emotional, relatable language. So I'm glad we're here to have this discussion today. It's a great question. And, I kind of like to start this discussion by talking about the fact that we are stepping into an era of new roles and new jobs and new ways of doing things that, may look a little different now and moving forward. And yeah, my background is in screenwriting and writing generally, film production, that sort of thing. And I would say probably 4 or 5 years ago, when generative AI first started poking its head into the zeitgeist, I got interested. And I remember to this day when a friend of mine he was an EP on a very well-known television show, and he said, "Hey, you got to check this thing out." And he showed me one of these early generative AI platforms, and it was like, you could type in a few words and it would write a paragraph for you at that point. And we were both like, "Oh my God, this is crazy." And that wasn't that long ago, in the grand scheme of things, compared to where we are today, it's almost like, we're already living in the future. But at that point, it kind of kicked off my interest in artificial intelligence, generative artificial intelligence technology. specifically as it related to writing, and then eventually as it relates to education as well. In addition, as you mentioned, in addition to being a writer, I've also been a mentor and a teacher and have built platforms online to be able to access more people and to be able to spread the good word of how to be a screenwriter in this strange little niche type of writing. And at the same time, I was studying generative artificial intelligence at Berkeley Law. I took a class from MIT. I took a class from there too, to just really understand the mechanics of how it all works, or at least to understand enough to be, semi-dangerous with it. And as I continued down that road, the Alpha School came across my radar, and like you, I became very interested in what they were doing there, and eventually sort of found my way to a position that really does what I'm good at other than writing, which is to say, how do we take these technical, complex things and make them accessible to other people? And, Alpha is a sufficiently unique and forward-thinking and in some ways revolutionary endeavors that it I think behooves them to know how to best be able to describe themselves to the world across various different aspects of the business. So anyway, that put us together, and I have been with Alpha since about February of this year. And so again, I know just about enough to be dangerous about the school and the people involved, and I continually am impressed and sometimes blown away, particularly by the kids that I meet that are actually a part of these schools. And I think when it comes to education, they're the ones that matter most. So I will always start there in terms of talking about whether something is good or bad or works or doesn't work or where the challenges are. It ultimately, in a school situation, comes
Yeah.
down to the kids.
Perfect. Well, I mean, well, exactly. I mean, you got me there. It's all about the kids, right? If we're
Yes.
doing something and we're not focusing on the kids, then we're broken already.
We're doing
So
great.
I love that sentiment. So I am curious, so how did you meet Alpha School? Did they recruit you? Did you go to them? How did that happen?
I reached out to them, and my first point of contact, everyone that comes to work for anywhere in the Alpha universe goes through their very, very rigorous screening process, and that's through a company called Crossover. And it's really remarkable because there are a number of tasks you have to do before you even get close to talking to a human being. There's some AI-led interview pieces. There are some AI-led, proof of experience pieces. There are some kind of on the job, scenarios that you have to respond to, also AI driven. And then there's also this test called the CCAT, which is, I forget exactly how many questions it is. I think it's something like 50 questions in 15 minutes. So it's super fast. It is very challenging, and they require that anyone who works there scores, in the 85th percentile or above. And that includes the teachers, that includes, anyone that works anywhere in the organization. And then, once you get to a point of actually getting an offer to work there, you have to take the same thing but proctored. So talk about pressure.
Okay.
Everybody jokes about how crazy pressurized that last test is, but
Yeah.
but
So
anyway, yeah.
I am curious about that assessment. So is it a like intelligence test, or is it a
Yeah,
personality thing? What are they measuring
no,
there?
no, it's a cognitive test. So
Okay.
you can Google CCAT and pull up an example of it.
Okay.
Crossover is not the only company that uses that test,
Okay.
but it's math problems. It's, sort of SAT type word
Okay.
problems, and it's also, but at the same time, it's also, IQ kind of test too, like with the different shapes recognitions and
Okay.
pattern recognition and that sort of thing. And it's really, really fast. I think I figured out it was like, I forget how many questions and how much time, but it was like 18 seconds per question. And some of those are ones where you're reaching back into your basic algebra 2 to
Yeah.
figure
Yeah. Going back to high school
it out.
again, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Um,
Well, that's fascinating. That's a a really interesting piece of this is you probably recall my conclusion about the Alpha School in my solo episode was it's not about technology, it's about people. And
Correct.
I raised the question. I said the one piece I didn't have visibility on was how do they onboard, right? How do you find
Right.
people and bring them in? So that's some great insight there into how they find these people who they don't call teachers.
Although we are on a road as part of the crafter of narrative within the company, we are on the road to calling them teachers at this point, away
Okay.
from guides. And for the very reason we talked about, leading with we are the school with no teachers is sort of 180 degrees from where we need to be. And in fact, you kind of hit on it too, but the teachers at these schools really, and we can get into this, but they really are sort of the secret sauce of the whole thing.
Mm,
And they are a really unique, special cross section of people that are both extraordinarily good at what they do. They're extraordinarily smart, but they also have, this emotional component too, where they are truly the motivation experts for all of the kids and develop motivational plans that are personalized per
mm.
kid and support the kids. So yeah, with it is there is obviously there's a technical component to all of it, but it is that human component that really makes it special.
Yeah. So good. Let's talk about this because certainly this is
Sure.
how I heard about the Alpha School, right? Was this headline, a school with no teachers, all the, teachers are being replaced with AI. And of course, I got it from kind of the education forum side of the horror of this. I mean, there were educators just screaming at the forums saying, this is exactly what's broken in the world and AI can't replace teachers. And then as I dug in on it, I went, they're missing the whole point here. This is just a label. This is clickbait, hype to call it a school with no teachers. And say, I even looked at some job postings and the job postings required a background in education. It's like, yeah, of course
Right.
they are hiring educators. This was truly just hype cycle. So, but talk to me a little bit more about that that component of this, that human component and the hiring, process. You've met obviously some of these the faculty. Just to point out too, you work for the school in Austin, Texas, but you don't live there, right? You're kind
No,
of
that's yeah,
commuting.
that's correct. Well, I mean, the one of the neat things about this organization too is that they pull talent from all over the world. And so you can, look at a map of all the employees that are online at any given time, and it literally is all over the world, which is kind of remarkable. I do a fair amount of traveling as well, so it's not 100% me just sitting at my desk here in LA. But yeah, it's a neat thing, and it's a neat thing to be able to meet people with different backgrounds from all over the world too, who bring their own, sort of POV on the way things work too, so which gives it sort of a global feel, which is really neat. But yeah, so I mean, I can talk about this from a couple different angles. I would say, the first thing is, why don't I talk about the technology a little bit too at the
Okay.
same time, because they are interwoven. And, basically when
All
we
right,
talk
so
about
so
that,
first, I want to make sure our listeners understand the. So one of these key concepts here, right, of the school is this condensed academic content delivery, right? So, and again, you can correct me if I've got this wrong, but what I've read is you have about a 2 hour period during the day when the students work with AI tutors and they get a lot of academic kind of knowledge acquisition stuff done that way very efficiently instead of sitting in classes, lecture based, whatever, for 6 hours a day. They get it in 2 hours and then they go spend time with these guides or teachers, kind of life skills stuff. Is that a fair kind of set the
close.
stage?
Yeah, let me
Okay.
let me let me let me sand out the edges on a couple of those things. So yeah, for sure, the sort of the core pedagogy of the school is that the core academics are taught first thing in the morning for a couple hours, and that frees up the rest of the day to explore passions to try new things, to learn life skills. And these things can be anything from public speaking to financial literacy to socialization to, just really learning about grit and hard work and how that all fits into it. Things that are not traditionally taught at your typical school. And so that's sort of in a nutshell, the foundation of the school. And the way that the AI tutor works into it is that essentially everything is at Alpha is built on data. So the first thing is kids are assessed over the course of the year. The assessments take the form of the MAP tests, which are a national standardized test. But prior to that, an incoming kid will take a battery of tests that tests for, math, English, science, these core academic features. And we'll essentially say, okay, your kid is at grade level here and is a little below grade level here on this subject and is a little higher here on this subject. And that information gets fed into our AI tutor. And then the AI tutor takes that information and assigns any number of adaptive apps that make up the curriculum that teach the kids. And as you mentioned on your previous podcast, one of those could be Khan Academy. We're working to make all of those, proprietary to Alpha. They're in development. I think the running line though is until they are not just as good, but better than what's commercially available off the shelf, we'll continue to use the best products out there.
Yeah.
But essentially, the AI tutor just kind of sets the bar. It says, okay, this is where you are, and this is what you need to get to the next level here. And it creates this personalized plan for every student. Every plan looks a little bit different. And it also, that plan comes out and goes to the teacher. And the teacher then has the job of saying, okay, I have this many kids in class, and I'm going to create a personalized motivational model for each of these kids so that they can go and attack those academics in the morning with vigor, with incentives, so that they love school, they love the process. And the data that we have gotten out, which is now 2 years running after the school year, I think it'll be three, it shows that kids have been able to learn at accelerated rates in less time, and that the map tests that come out are scoring in the 90th and higher percentiles, in some classes, up to like the 97th, 98th percentiles. So, in terms of the data, it's working. Kids are learning the core academics in this finite, smaller period of time in the morning to open up the rest of the day for these other explorations, which we can get into too. But the key to all of that is the teacher, who is no longer in front of the classroom teaching at 30 different kids or creating lesson plans or grading papers. The teacher is really freed up to do the things that they're best at, which is to motivate the kids and to support the kids, both academically and, on a social, emotional level directly as well. So in that sense, that's where I kind of circle back to the fact that these teachers are a really rare mix of skill sets. They're obviously good with kids, but also really good with, kind of a broad understanding of a lot of different things. And that's what makes our alpha teachers in the sister schools as well so unique and so special.
Yeah. So very interesting. One of the things that I picked up on there, you've said this now a couple different times. You've talked about motivation, and then you talked about incentives. So elaborate a little bit more on what does that really mean? What does that look like? How does a teacher there motivate or incentivize a student to achieve higher academic?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think the way that I would start this conversation is to say that it is about how to figure out how to get a kid to engage. And so, Eric, if you're in my class and I'm a teacher, I get to know you a little bit. I figure out what you like doing, what you don't like doing, sort of what makes you tick. And then from there, we determine what is going to, incentive wise be something to, put in front of you at first to say, okay, if you need to meet your academic responsibilities in these 2 hours and you have to get through these set of lessons and these set of lessons, then that will that will allow you to open up a different set of time to work on a project that you really like in the afternoon. If you don't meet those, then, we'll have to spend that time working back on your academics. Or, it could be, so, there are alpha bucks, that become sort of a cash reward system for things. Again, really just to engage the kid. And that there's a real philosophy that once you're engaged and then you find success academically or otherwise, that sets up the stage for further success. And so even if it's some sort of, dare I say, extrinsic motivator out of the gate, the idea is I'd rather have an extrinsically motivated kid than one who doesn't care about school, doesn't enjoy school, and is not engaged at all. Because
Yeah.
that kid can't learn and certainly can't learn at the rate that the kid who is engaged is. So there's one of the core commitments of the school itself is that our kids will love school. And so that's so broadly defined that the teachers really, I think, look at each kid individually and be like, okay, what do I need to do to make you love school? What is it? What do you love? What do you love doing? How do
Yeah.
we tailor those motivational goals around what it is you already love doing? And it's that personalized. And it's that, wide open in terms of the number of tools that the teachers have to be able to develop those mechanisms.
Yeah. So a couple of things pop in my head. So first of all, on not a challenge thing, but just a comment, right? Because I think this there's a component of reality in this. One of the things you hear about, private schools and that I think somewhere I read Alpha School claims that their students are in the top 1% academically or something like that, right? One of the arguments coming in is that, well, you've got the cream of the crop students, right? Your students are coming in already motivated, wanting to learn, as opposed to, somewhere out in public school land where, most of these kids don't want to be there and don't want to learn. What's the quickest, easiest way I can just get through this, get a grade, and, you know, go play my video games or whatever, right? And so you have an advantage out the gate that the students coming in, the quality of the students is probably much, much higher, already motivated, wanting to be there than others. Is that a fair?
I mean, I see your point, and I think there's probably some truth to that for sure. I don't know that it's universally true though, because I don't know that just because parents have the amount of money to spend on private school necessarily translates to motivated kids. I mean, in fact, I know that that's not the
Yeah,
case.
it's
And I
never
know
going to
that
be
private schools,
100%, but there's
no,
an
and I know that
advantage, I think. Yeah,
sure, sure. I mean, I think there is an inherent advantage in a lot of ways to private schools over public schools in terms of access to technology, access to, higher level sort of everything. So I think it's a little apples to oranges talking about public to private school in this particular case. And also just to say too, we do have initiatives that are going out into the public schools and in charter schools, and so there are more prongs to the alpha universe that I discover all the time that are really trying to shift this pedagogy across the board, not just for our specific schools,
yeah.
but to really get people to rethink the way education could be.
Cool. Well, I want to make a comment also on, you call them alpha bucks. So this immediately reminded me, I think I had told you when we talked earlier about my conversation with Nolan Bushnell, the founder of Atari, right?
Yes.
So his book and a lot of what we talked about on the show was his school called Texas. And Exodexa, the book is the manifesto, but this was actually one of his concepts also was kind of pay kids for good grades, that you incentivize them by, and it was the exact same kind of model you just described, right? They had some kind of Exodexa bucks, and by finishing their lessons, scoring high on something, getting through maybe that subject that isn't their favorite subject, but they do it anyway because they know they need to, and then they get some bucks they can spend on a movie or extra snacks, you know, in the cafeteria or whatever, right? There was rewards they could get. Some of it was even time, right? You could use these
Sure.
bucks to say, oh, I want some free time to go explore this thing or do a field trip or whatever. But I actually like that concept. Even my own kid growing up, we realized that my son was motivated by money, and we
Right.
paid him for A's on his report card. Said, yeah, you'll get $10 for a B, but you'll get $20 for an A. And that was all he needed. I want $20. Okay, I'll go get the A, you know.
Yeah,
Um, and
absolutely.
and so I don't see fault in paying kids to rewarding them, incentivizing them, if it gets them to push that little bit harder. And the world is built that way, right? I
For
mean,
sure.
the
For
rest of
sure.
life is also about that. You work hard enough, you get a little more money, you got more freedom to do what you want to do in your free time because you earned a little more. So, anyway, it's all good. Yeah,
Yeah, no,
love
it
some of this
is,
stuff.
there's definitely a gamification to all of it. And again, I think the just to underscore where the philosophy sort of kicks in is that, if you're engaged and properly incentivized to go do the thing and do well, and then you do it well, then all of a sudden you also get a certain intrinsic reward to that too. Oh,
Yeah,
I am an A student, or wow, I can get 100 on this. And so that begins to build a model for continued success.
yeah,
And it also provides, a bridge over the tough parts too, because a lot of learning is really hard. And a lot of, one of the founding tenets of the school too is to do hard things, do things that seem impossible.
mhm,
And when we try to do things that are hard or impossible, we're going to run into, moments of failure. And I think that if you're not properly incentivized or engaged on those things, that's when we quit, right? That's when it's not worth it,
yeah,
learning how to play guitar and you have blisters on your fingers and you're like, this is really dumb. Why am I doing this? And you put the guitar down and you never really learn it. But if you're really engaged and motivated, then you work through those hard moments. You work through the pain of those, the process of learning something. And
yeah,
so it really is, it's part of it. It sounds trite almost at the beginning, but it really becomes the foundation for a sort of holistic growth mindset as we go.
yeah.
So,
Well, it reminds me of another kind of aspect of education for me, and that's inspiration, right? So, I remember even my brothers. So one of my brothers is absolutely brilliant, off the charts, PhD in cellular chemistry or whatever. Anyway, I remember him describing to me as I was getting ready to go back to school later in life. In my 40s, I decided I needed to go back and get a bachelor's degree in computer science and eventually got a master's. And I remember him talking about the difference between going to like community college or your local whatever school is available to you to a more prestigious school. And his take on it was that the faculty at these higher end schools are inspirational, right? That they get you to think about things you would never have thought about. They don't just deliver the content, say, oh, here's what you need to learn, here's how you learn it, go, right? They inspire you to take on those challenges, to do the impossible, to believe you can be something better than maybe you had a vision for yourself because you've now met this person who is brilliant and interesting. So how well is the Alpha School kind of embracing that model? I mean, these teachers inspirational?
oh, 100%. As you were describing it, I was like, yeah, that's the whole gist, which is to say, stepping away from delivery of content, which is something that can be done so much better by an AI tutor sitting over a stack of really good adaptive learning apps. That becomes the content delivery mechanism
Mhm.
and truly leaves the teacher to inspire, to get kids to discover, and that's where that whole afternoon piece opens up this whole new world of like, what is, as in the younger grades, it's like, hey, try this or try that, try this thing. As we get towards the middle grades, it's more like, what's your thing? Have you discovered your thing? And by high school, it's let's build a professional project or product that is on par with, the best professionals in the world
Mm.
because you've had so many years to really work through and discover what it is that inspires you,
Yep.
and also is the thing that both in terms of the teachers that are inspiring you, but also what intrinsically inspires you too. So that's kind of the whole ticket, is to really utilize the human element of the school in a way that allows them to teach in a manner that is what they do best and what kids respond to the best.
Yeah. Hey, let's take a quick commercial break. I want to plug the Human Intelligence Movement. No, this is not a paid advertisement. I'm just a fan. I love what they're doing. And the mission of the Human Intelligence Movement is to ensure that all students have the skills to thrive and succeed in an AI world. So join the movement. There's a link in the show notes. Get involved. All right, now back to our conversation with Jon Stewart. So we're going to hear a lot more about these life skills workshops, and we're also going to talk about how they can scale this model and make it more accessible. Enjoy. Yeah. So let's talk about ongoing teacher development then,
Sure.
because teachers get stale too, right? Or disengaged, right? I mean, a teacher has the same needs, I think, that a student does, right? They have to be constantly inspired and motivated themselves to want to go learn and grow. So what programs are in place there that focus on teacher development and keeping them engaged in writing or researching or experimenting even, no fear of failure themselves? What's happening with the faculty there?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think some of those things are in development in terms of, what ongoing teacher development actually looks like. There have been a lot of things discussed there. We've talked about using the summer times to allow teachers to step into more of that. At the same time, I think there's an expectation coming in that, a lot of these teachers have areas of expertise that they're good at or have had even a past career in sometimes, or training or whatnot. And so, there's a certain inherent development that goes on over the course of designing workshops for the kids. And a lot of times those workshops will also involve bringing in outside experts too. So I think in some ways the kids and the teachers are learning alongside one another from these external experts as these workshops take shape. And you know the workshops that are the most popular or that have sort of the widest appeal end up getting repeated, but they also cycle through new ones. And sometimes the workshops are designed entirely around a passion that a kid brings forward too. So, I
Can you
think
give
there's
me
just,
an example of a workshop like that? It's a
oh,
with somebody
sure.
external coming in.
Yeah, I mean, it happens all the time. I think it's, if it's, you know, opening a business, they will bring in a business expert to talk about these are the things that you need to look out for in a startup. These are the things you need to worry about on the cost side, and this is how you recoup these things, this is how you keep track of inventory. Again, things that are not necessarily the forte of the teacher themselves,
Right.
but are essential skills to the workshop itself that are being taught to the kids. So in this particular scenario, one workshop was about opening an Airbnb that actually had real, people coming through and staying. And another one was setting up an actual food truck where the kids ran every aspect of the food truck, from food production to delivery to the financial side of it. And, they're always looking for new opportunities to really engage kids, and again engage the teachers themselves too. So again, I think it's a different culture. It's rather than spending 180 days a year teaching the same from the same old curriculum and doing the same thing year after year after year. Each session that we go through is unique, to the goals of the students, to what comes through the workshops and the experts that we bring in from outside. So it's just a different culture that tries to build some of that, into it from from an inherent standpoint, not just a what do we add on to keep our teachers
Yeah.
engaged? What do we add on to make sure they're staying current with everything? It really is it's kind of an ongoing evolution as we go.
Yeah. Have they gotten you to do a workshop on screenwriting yet?
Not yet, but I am working with some kids. We're doing a TEDx event in Austin at the end of the month, and so I have been working with some kids on storytelling, basic storytelling,
Mm.
and public speaking skills. So we'll
Awesome.
see. And I did talk to one kid who's a screenwriter too, and I'm like I'm always there for whatever I can do. So
Yeah, no, that's good. So all of this has been very positive, John. So
sure.
pop the hood for me a little bit, and what are the things that are still challenges that you haven't conquered yet, that
Yeah.
still a work in progress? Where are the rough edges still?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the I can speak to a couple of those things. I know on a technology side, you know, the technology is just changing so fast that trying to make sure that everything stays current, to make sure that the stuff that we're developing, again, like I said, stands up to the best stuff out there, and when the best stuff out there has its own whole organization trying to make it the best thing out there, that's definitely a challenge. But, and I think making sure that whole process remains as integrated and smooth as possible is an ongoing set of challenges for sure. I can speak to another, which is that, we are expanding. We are trying to move to more cities around the country. And, it's a whole different set of new things to look out for, whether it's finding real estate that's in a good place, building a school of basically people who are willing to be early adopters and step into this new thing and kind of hold hands and say, all right, we're going to step into a school that has maybe 25 or 30 kids for the first year and be a part of that. I wouldn't quite call it an experiment because it's been proven to be working, but it does require a certain leap of faith and being able to really go out and meet with folks and try to get them to see the value and again, yeah, kind of take that leap of faith with us is an enormous set of challenges as well.
Yeah. I'm trying to think which direction I want to go next because there's a
Yeah,
couple
there's a bunch
things still. Oh yeah,
for
there's
sure.
all kinds of things. We could talk for hours.
Totally.
Let's talk about this life skills side, right? So I know, when you've talked quite a lot about it, right? These kids doing projects and workshops and allowing them to be curious and kind of pick something of their own interest or passion. So how do you assess that side of things, right? So when you say life skills, how do you know that it's working? Are these kids really coming out of these programs with better life skills? How do you measure that? And I'm going to put you on the spot here because you said you're collecting all kinds of data. So I'm hoping you can quantify for me a little bit how you guys are assessing this.
Yeah, for sure. So each life skills workshop, well, I could go about answering this a couple different ways too.
Okay.
I guess let me first start by breaking down sort of what the life skills are that the school focuses on. And they fall into sort of five buckets. The first is leadership or teamwork. The second is entrepreneurship and financial literacy. The third is storytelling and public speaking. The fourth is socialization or relationship building.
Hmm.
And then the last one is, as we mentioned, it's grit and hard work. And so the life skills workshops that they all stem from that core set of pillars we call them sometimes.
Yep.
And within those pillars there are a bunch of specific skills, whether it's being able to write a persuasive essay, or whether it's being able to tackle adversity. And one of the main things around the workshop design is that qualifies it as a workshop that will actually be put forth is that it has to have some sort of measurable outcome. It has to have some sort of success metric. And so that success metric, whatever it is, whether it's, finishing a 5K race in 30 minutes for a second grader, that becomes a metric of success. And they either meet it or they don't. And the goal of the teacher then is to make sure that every kid meets that success metric, no matter how hard it may seem at the beginning of the session. And so that, that is actually one of the workshops that the kids do. And
Right.
that, and that data does come out. Those are, and those are measured by what are called test to pass events. And, it's something that at the end of every session, every kid goes through and has to demonstrate, whether or not that skill has been, you know,
Sorry, I have a quick follow-up on that then. So
yeah,
how do you deal with the scenario where a kid has a disability or asthma or whatever, and running a 5K is just simply,
yes,
you know,
for sure. For sure, we
yeah.
work around those, or work them into the, again, that speaks to our ability to personalize everything. So yeah, obviously, if somebody has an inherent disability that disqualifies them from what is standard for the rest of the class, we would tailor that according to that student for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Because you just don't want them to feel bad that, oh, everybody else is getting measured on this and,
Of course not.
I can't.
Yeah, of
Right.
course
Yeah.
not. Yeah, of
So,
course.
or what was the other piece that popped in my head there as you were talking? It's gone. It's okay. It'll come back to
It'll
me.
come back.
Yeah. Yeah. So, oh, so we're trying to measure these things. Oh, it was you commented on persuasion, right? So one of the challenges I had my own startup school here in Hong Kong at one point, and a founder, ed tech founder, we were doing a coding boot camp style thing,
Oh, cool,
but
cool.
we were trying to measure some of these soft skills too, and this kind of grit thing was kind of one of those in there. The problem we ran into, the difficulty, right? So like persuasion is one of those. It's quite subjective in who's reviewing it, right? Were you really persuasive? And so the consistency, how do you put a number on this when one teacher will look at it this way and go, oh, that's very persuasive. But another teacher may look at it and go, nah, you didn't persuade me. So it's not, right? So how do you kind of level that? And some of it we found was really trying to give the teachers some handle, some guidelines, a framework or scaffolding, if you will,
Yeah,
a
rubric
rubric,
or
right, that says this is how we distinguish between, low, medium, or high degree of persuasiveness. How are you guys working through that? Because it can be very subjective.
yeah, for sure. I mean, I think as much as possible, we try to make it so that it's not subjective or that it's as objective as possible. I think we'd sort of start there. And I think that part of that is, how you define the test to pass skill. So in some of these, like in public speaking, if it's, if the task becomes like to write a persuasive speech, then it would be to, first write the speech and then, take it out and practice it. One of my favorite examples is a group of kids then took their speeches that they had memorized and they took them to the first round to an animal shelter and gave the talks to the animals at the animal shelter, and then moved up from there to an assisted living home and gave the speech to a bunch of very captive older adults there, and eventually working themselves up to standing in front of a stage of their peers and families and whatnot. Some other, trying to make it, simulate a real audience as much as possible. And then, essentially trying to collect as much data as possible from that to say, if there are exit surveys to say, oh, was this persuasive? Was this not persuasive?
Mm,
So I think we challenge ourselves to not only create tasks that are seemingly, certainly difficult, seemingly impossible in some cases, but then also to capture, to your point, capture whatever data we can as much as possible in as objective a manner as possible. So there's a lot of thought that goes into the designing of these, and again, they all map out to an individual. I don't love the term soft skills because I think it's you know again, what's a soft skill versus a hard skill in terms of what its use is in real life as we become adults and are making decisions on our own. But certainly all as much of everything we do is qualifiable and quantifiable so that the measurement is there.
yeah. So I don't know why this just popped in my head, random stuff, but do you have anything that's intended to teach failure? So, and what popped in my mind was Star Trek, right? There was that one test that James Kirk
The
had to do.
Kobayashi Maru test,
Right,
right?
right. The Kobayashi Maru test, exactly. That was designed to be impossible, right? It was to, show you that you have to be ready to fail. And of course, he cheats and it throws them all off because you're not supposed to cheat. You're supposed to fail. So I'm just curious if you
Wrath-Con is one
guys,
of my top 10 movies.
yeah, yeah, okay. Talk about that at all, right? How you teach kids that failure happens and it's part of the process and it's going to happen to you and, shake it off, learn from it, move on.
Yeah, that's a great question. And to my knowledge, I don't know of any that are set up like that, that are, fail one way or fail the other and deal with it. But that's a good thought. I'm going to make that as a note for a future workshop. But at the same time, we do not shy away from things that, again, like learning a new skill, learning to play the guitar, learning how to run a 5K, like those do have inevitable moments of, if not, extreme difficulty, then certainly failure. And that is not something we shy away from. If a kid is like, I can't do this, then the teacher stops and says, all right, let's unpack that.
Yep.
Let's live with that for a second.
Yeah.
Let's get under the hood of that and really figure it out and figure out what we can do to get you past this.
Yeah.
Because again, like a lot of stuff, these are muscles. These are muscles that take a lifetime to develop, and I think a lot of traditional education environments don't necessarily allow for us to live with those really hard, really failure moments. And my son is a math kid, and he talks about the fact that math is taught all wrong in this country, and and
How old
really
is he?
he's 15 now,
Okay.
but
So he knows everything now.
he's quite accomplished when it comes to math. He's actually a very humble kid too,
Okay.
but to his point, it's really less about running through the motions or running through the algorithm of what you need to do to solve a problem, and really putting problems in front of kids that you look at and you're like, I have no idea how to solve that. I don't know how to do that. And then dealing with that feeling of, okay, I don't know how to do that, but there is a way to solve it. Let me throw some darts, pull out some tools, figure out some
Yeah.
new ways to look at it. And, I think in a global sense, that's what Alpha is trying to do across the board, is to really say, when you hit those moments of failure, that doesn't mean that you're at a roadblock. It means that you need to take a new perspective on it, or you need
Mm.
to back up and try it again, or, any of the number of tools that we have for tackling hard things.
Yeah. Well, I wish somebody had taught me when I was young this concept of the system one, system two brain, right?
Right.
Sometimes you hit that thing, right? And you just look and you go, I have no idea what to do with that. And
Right.
so what do? You stop and you go take a walk around the park, whatever, go do something else. Meanwhile, system one brain goes, hey, here's how you solve that. And it just pops
Yeah.
in your head. You go, oh, I know what to do. Right? And you go back
Yes.
and now I've got a clue. So yes, sometimes stepping away is the answer. Don't
A
beat your
hundred
head on the
percent.
wall. Yeah, walk
As
away, let system one process behind the scenes subconsciously, and it'll pop in your head. Yeah.
having spent a good deal of my career creating things and writing things, I know that system very, very well. So,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
but
Cool.
it's a great point. It's a great
Yeah.
point.
Hey,
I was just gonna say one other funny thing that I wanted to respond to, the way you said it, is I can't tell you the number of conversations I've had with adults I work with, and colleagues who are like, if I would have learned that when I was that age, and it's true. It really is. I feel like the number of books that I bought in my 40s to say, like, oh, how do I do this, or what's the secret to that, or
yeah.
there's these are a lot of things that we're trying to get into the education of kids from a very young age. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. So just another thought too. Here's another, workshop you can put in the back, in the parking lot for now until you come up with a way. But I'm a big fan of juggling as I don't know if I'd call it a life skill, but I love the challenge of it, the creativity, right? It can be very artistic. You come up with your own moves or invent a new trick. There's just something really, really exciting for me about that. But I thought of it because I actually had times when system one, system two were working, and I had like a new pattern just pop in my head. Of course, at the time, I didn't understand that was system one, right? Was kind of thinking about my juggling. I used to be a professional juggler, but I actually invented some tricks where I like literally woke up in the middle of the night and went, oh, could I do that? Could I get
That's
him to go in, in
amazing.
that direction? And
Amazing.
yeah, yeah. So, but anyway, juggling is a great activity. It's physical. I have taught, people with disabilities, a variety of different things. I had one guy who could barely stand. I've forgotten what it was he had, but yeah, he could barely walk. He was a really lumbering walk, but he propped himself up and he stood there and learned to juggle three balls with me at an event. And everybody was looking at us like, really? You're going to try and teach
Wow.
this guy? And I was like, yeah, he wants to try. I'm going to try and teach him. Absolutely. And
That's
and
so cool. That is
and
so cool.
yes, and he came back an hour after I'd given him the lesson and wanted to show me, and the whole place went wild. All these people cheering that this man with a disability learned to juggle three balls in an hour
Yeah.
with a
It's
lesson with
it
me.
you're
Yeah,
preaching to the choir on that one. Some of the greatest educators and people I know throughout my life have been jugglers, and I've seen one of my high school biology teacher was a juggler and an incredible human being. And to your point, one of the triathlons a triathlon workshop that I think it was second or third grade, might have been third grade. I had second or third grade at Alpha was a triathlon that involved solving a Rubik's cube, juggling, and running. So
there you go.
we've got our toes into juggling as well.
Yeah,
So
all right. Of course, there's also an event called joggling where you run and juggle at the same time.
oh
So
my
if you really
God.
want to mix it up. And they have races. There's actual
Yeah,
competitions. These guys get on a track and
I
they try
believe
to
it.
run around the track as fast as they can while juggling.
I believe it.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. I
great.
never competed in that space, but some
But
fun.
it's out there. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, we've got just a couple of minutes.
Sure.
Give me a vision for the future, John. Where are we going to be? Where's Alpha School going to be in 3 to 5 years?
I'll tell you exactly where that vision is. So, in addition to being a part of, leading this narrative side of Alpha, I am also a part of the expansion team, which is literally going out to new cities, setting up new schools. And our goals are ambitious. They are setting up 25 schools within the next year to really begin to expand that to, thousands of schools over the course of the next 3 to 5 years. And I think part of that, and again, part of that is also not just Alpha, but it is all these other prongs I was talking about through charter schools, through going into existing public schools and bringing this pedagogy there as well. I think the ambition really is to say, let's change the face of education in America and give it a much needed update with a tool that is now ours to use in terms of the AI technology part about it. And so I think really, sort of anti-humbly saying, like, changing the face of what education looks like is the ultimate vision here. So
Yeah. Cool. So how do we make it more accessible? Because right now it is a private school. It's expensive, right?
sure, sure.
Most folks can't afford to send their children to an alpha school. So
Right.
how do we bridge that?
That's a great question. And I think that that's a responsibility that we have as we go. And, in some ways, I think expanding with these goals in mind is almost a wide scale proof of concept. If we can open 25 schools and bring the same sort of data forward that have come out of the Austin schools over the course of the last couple of years, then we're saying, hey, look, we can go anywhere. We can go into any market. We can replicate what's happening here. And that opens up doors to to venture capitalists. That opens doors potentially to the ways that the governments work, in terms of school choice and that sort of thing. So, and obviously I think there's some slippery slopes on all of this in terms of what it looks like to be accessible, what it looks like to provide for everyone. Because I do believe that education is something that we all should have equal access to.
Yeah.
So I think, obviously with the success of this sort of leading proof of concept work, I think, that will afford us opportunities to do things on a wider scale too.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. Okay. Anything we didn't talk about you wanted to share?
No, I think we covered it. I just it's one of those things I'll return where I started, which is to say, as I was doing my, due diligence reconnaissance on Alpha, a lot of it looked really good on paper. A lot of it sounded good when in conversation. But it wasn't until I actually went to the schools and saw the kids and saw what they were doing and talked to them one-on-one and watched these teachers in action as they motivated these kids and what they said and how they did it, and they're seeing those relationships sort of firsthand. That's where I was like, okay, now I get it. It's
Mm.
the kids. And it's the incredible stories that come out of the work that they're doing at literally every stage of the spectrum, whether they're younger kids or in that awkward middle part, or whether they're in high school, about to step out into the real world past the K through 12 academic gates. So that's where I said, okay, this is the right thing to put my energy into right now.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me and share your
Likewise.
insights here. This has been really fun and absolutely eye-opening. There's so many aspects of this that I really kind of wondered about, and I don't trust the media.
Right.
The articles you read, they're all biased and either
Yes.
really pro or really negative. And
Right.
so yeah, no, this has been really good to get some inside scoop on what's going on there. And
Yeah, no, and I really appreciate you having me on. It's been great talking to you. I love hearing all your stories too, and I like talking about this stuff too because they're still schools, and schools are filled with children, and they're messy, sometimes messy,
yeah,
ever changing landscape and set of challenges. So in that way, Alpha is no different than any other place.
yeah.
But yeah, it's good to talk through it all with you.
Awesome. Well, I hope you have a great success there. I know you're pretty new to the organization and it's still cutting your teeth on some stuff there, but yeah, I sense your passion and I hope that yeah, you do great things over the next few years with the Alpha School and we'll stay in touch.
Awesome. Yeah, please. I would like that. Thank you so much for your time today and having me on. And yeah, let's don't be a stranger.
All right. Well, thank you. Okay, there you have it. The Alpha School is not replacing teachers with AI. They're using AI to enhance learning experiences, and they're using AI to focus on each child as an individual with unique needs and interests and talents. Of course, it isn't all perfect. And, as Jon said, it's still education, which means it's messy and chaotic at times. And there's, lots that they still want to do and need to improve on. So, they're constantly learning and they're learning from their mistakes. He was pretty transparent about that. I love the honesty and the openness there. And I respect the fact that they're what they're trying to do, right? Their vision is pretty awesome, really, and they're collecting a lot of data which will validate, right, for all the rest of us whether this is really working or it's just smoke and mirrors. Okay, so that's really really good. We need that evidence to see if it's working and to see their progress and how it evolves over time. So we hope they do continue to share their successes and their failures so that others can pick up on what they're doing, and hopefully if the model really is working, that others can emulate their success. I'm Eric Byron. Thanks for listening to the Education Innovators podcast. I'm so glad you're here. If you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, what are you waiting for? Season 3 is packed with amazing stories of innovation and education that you don't want to miss. All right. Thanks to all those education innovators out there. You are making a difference.